For this episode of the Books and Parchments podcast, we're continuing to bring to you the book, Nehemiah, Restoring the Testimony of God, by Kaung. We were given permission by Christian Fellowship Publishers to produce this entire audiobook, so be sure to catch each episode in its right order. Here is Chapter 8. Watch and Pray. Nehemiah 4, verse 9. Then we prayed to our God, and set a watch against them day and night. Mark 14, verse 38. Watch and pray, that ye enter not into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh weak. In the process of building the wall, the Bible says that Jerusalem shall be built in troublous times. Daniel 9, verse 25. In other words, they did not have an easy, peaceful time to do the job. They were contested from the very beginning to the very end while they were building. And it came to pass that when Sanballat heard that we built the wall, he was angry and very indignant, and mocked the Jews. And he spoke before his brethren and the army of Samaria, and said, What do these feeble Jews? Shall they be permitted to go on? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of rubbish when they are burned? And Tobijah the Ammonite was by him, and he said, Even that which they build, if a fox went up, it would break down their stone wall. Nehemiah 4, verses 1 through 3. When Sanballat the Horonite, and Tobijah the slave, the Ammonite, and Geshem the Arabian heard that the escaped remnant were building the wall, they mocked. The first thing from the enemy is mocking. They laughed. They said, What are they doing, these few people? Do they try to build a wall? Do they want to rebel against the king? Oh, even if they should build a wall, when the foxes climb to the top, the whole wall will collapse. Hear our God, for we are despised, and turn their reproach upon their own head, and give them for a prey in a land of captivity, and cover not their iniquity, and let not their sin be blotted out from before thee, for they have provoked the builders. But we built the wall, and all the wall was joined together to the half thereof, for the people had a mind to work. Verses 4 through 6. Nehemiah heard their mocking, but he did not argue with them. He went to the Lord and said, Now, Lord, you heard what they said. And he continued to build. But the enemies had no part nor memorial in Jerusalem. See chapter 2, verse 20. Brothers and sisters, today, if you are burdened with the building together of God's people as one, you will hear a lot of mocking. People will say, For 2,000 years nothing has been accomplished. Who are you? Do you think you can do it? Oh, what you have done, even the foxes cannot stand on it, or the whole thing will collapse and end in nothing. Are you going to listen to that? If you listen, your hands will be weakened. You will stop building. You will say, It's no use. A few days ago, I was in Columbus, Ohio, fellowshipping with some believers who said they had a vision of the church. And they had plunged themselves into it, wanting to start a church gathering and build the church. They eventually became disillusioned. Finally, some of them said, It cannot be done. These believers were not novices. They had been used by God in the past. They were gifted and led many to Christ. And yet when these men of God came together to seek the Lord's face, some among them said, It is hopeless. It cannot be done. God's people will continue to be divided. It is just impossible. This is the mocking of the flesh. Nehemiah did not listen to it. He did not argue with them. He just went to the Lord and asked the Lord to strengthen his hands. So they continued on. They built until all the breaches were filled, and the wall was half of its full height. And it came to pass, when Sanballat and Tobijah and the Arabians and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites heard that the walls of Jerusalem were being repaired, that the breaches began to be stopped, then they were very wroth, and conspired all of them together to come to fight against Jerusalem, and to hinder it. And our adversaries said, They shall not know, neither see, till we come into the midst of them, and kill them, and put an end to the work. And it came to pass that when the Jews that dwelt by them came and told us so 10 times, from all the places whence they returned to us. Verses 7 through 8 and 11 through 12. And when the enemies of the Jews heard about this, they were angry, really angry. What did they do? They said, We will go in and attack. We will kill the people so that the wall will not be completed. At that time, very few of the Jewish remnant lived in Jerusalem. Most of them were scattered in surrounding villages and cities nearby. They were close to these enemies and heard rumors. So 10 times those people who lived in the suburban areas sent messages to Nehemiah saying, "We have to stop. We cannot do this. The enemies are going to attack Jerusalem." I sat in the lower places behind the wall, in exposed places. I even set the people, according to their families, with their swords, their spears, and their bows. And I looked and rose up, and said to the nobles, and to the rulers, and to the rest of the people, "Be not afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and terrible, and fight for your brethren, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your houses." Verses 13 through 14. So Nehemiah gathered the people together and said, "Let's guard it. Let's fight for the Lord." And when the enemy heard that they would not give up building the wall, they gave up their attack. And from that time forth, the half of my servants wrought in the work, and the other half of them held the spears and the shields and the bows and the corslets. And the captains were behind all the house of Judah. They that built on the wall, and they that bore burdens, with those that loaded, wrought in the work with one hand, and with the other they held a weapon. Verses 16 and 17. From that time on, those who labored held in one hand a spear, and in the other the burden for the building work. Those who labored girded their swords by their sides. Verse 18. Half of Nehemiah's servants worked with their hands, and half of them held the spears, shields, and bows, waiting and ready to fight. In other words, they worked with watchfulness. During the whole time of building the wall, Nehemiah and his servants never took their clothes off. Verse 23. They were always ready. Brothers and sisters, to rebuild the wall is a difficult task. How can God's people be built together? With the assaults of the enemies coming from all sides to weaken our hands, we must build with one hand on the wall and with the other hand on the spear. In other words, a spiritual battle is going on all the time, every moment. If we are not watchful in prayer, the enemies will attack and we will be killed. The Lord said, "Watch and pray." Matthew 26, verse 41, and Luke 21, verse 36. This is not the time for us to take off our garments and rest. This is not the time for us to take off the whole armor of God. Ephesians 6, verse 11. Once the church takes up the whole armor of God, the church cannot take it down until the battle has been won, until the Lord returns. In Nehemiah's time, because of such faithfulness to watch and pray, the work continued on. You've been listening to Nehemiah by Stephen Kaung. For more on this book and other books by Stephen Kaung, you can visit our website, booksandparchments.com, or find us on Facebook or Instagram at Books and Parchments. May the Lord encourage you and be encouraged by you.